All right, ready to dive deep into the mission.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited for this one.
This film is epic in every sense of the word. 18th century South America, Jesuit missions, the Guarani people.
And Robert De Niro. Don't forget Robert De Niro.
Right, how could I? De Niro as a mercenary turned priest? I mean, come on, we've got some incredible excerpts about the film praising it to the skies.
Especially the music.
Yeah, the music, legendary Ennio Morricone, of course. But here's the thing. Our source material, it suggests there's more to this story.
Oh, like what?
Especially when it comes to the Oscars. Seems like something wasn't quite right there.
The Mission is definitely a powerful film. The music is just, wow. It's really something else. Morricone, he blends liturgical chorales, indigenous drumming, Spanish guitar.
It's like he created a whole sonic world.
Exactly. You can practically feel the tension, the beauty of these cultures clashing and merging.
You're the expert on film music history. What else jumps out at you from all this material we have?
Well, Morricone's career, it's just mind-blowing. Most people know him from the spaghetti westerns.
Oh, yeah, those iconic scores.
But he was so much more than that. He wrote for comedies, thrillers, even horror films.
Seriously, this guy did it all.
And his work outside of film, his classical compositions, they're equally impressive.
The bio mentions that he started as a ghostwriter.
Yeah, arranging music for other composers.
Talk about humble beginnings.
He was already pushing boundaries back then.
I know. He was part of this group called Gruppo di Improvvisazione Nuova Contonanza.
Intense name, right?
It sounds pretty intense, yeah.
They were pioneers, free improvisation, blending genres, decades before it was trendy. Think about it, you've probably heard Morricone sampled in hip-hop tracks without even knowing it.
Whoa, that's crazy.
His influence is everywhere.
Okay, so, the mission. This plot summary, it's gripping. Jesuit missions, a mercenary seeking redemption, political intrigue, and then this tragic climax. De Niro's character arc. From ruthless mercenary to finding redemption with the very people he wronged.
It's a powerful transformation.
Yeah, it really is.
Rodrigo Mendoza, that's his character's name. This hardened mercenary, carrying the weight of his past sins. He's searching for a way to make amends, and he finds it through his connection with the Guarani people.
There's this theme of forgiveness, reconciliation running throughout the film, and then you have this historical backdrop, the Treaty of Madrid.
Yeah, the treaty throws a wrench into things.
It really does.
It redraws the borders of South America,
Yeah.
giving control of the mission land to Portugal. And unlike Spain, Portugal wasn't interested in protecting the Guarani.
They just want to exploit them.
Exactly, for slave labor. That sets up the main conflict of the film and forces everyone to make some tough choices.
And within that conflict, there's this moral dilemma, right? Father Gabriel, he champions pacifism
Versus Mendoza, who believes they need to arm the Guarani.
to defend their home. How do you fight for what you believe in, especially when the stakes are so high?
It makes you question the justification for violence, even in the face of oppression. It's a question that's still relevant today. And the mission doesn't offer any easy answers.
No, it doesn't.
The climax, it's tragic. Colonial forces attacking a religious procession, the Guarani fighting back, and that ambiguous ending. It leaves you grappling with these questions long after the credits roll.
It really does.
Now, about that score, it's breathtaking. Reading these excerpts, you can practically feel yourself transported to the Amazon rainforest.
Right into the heart of it.
The music adds another dimension to the characters' emotions, to the clash of cultures.
How did he do that? Achieve that? I mean, it's incredible.
It's Morricone's ability to blend musical styles.
Yeah.
Liturgical chorales representing the Jesuit missionaries, indigenous drumming, Spanish guitar. It's not just background music. It's a character in itself, expressing those emotions, the tensions that words sometimes can't.
It's no wonder the soundtrack was such a global hit. And then, of course, you have Gabriel's oboe.
It became this iconic piece.
Yeah, on its own. What's the story there?
Gabriel's oboe was later adapted into the song Nella Fantasia, which has been covered by so many artists. It's a fascinating transformation. Want to hear a bit of each?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Back to back, so you can hear how Morricone took this melody and gave it a new life.
Okay, wow. You can really hear that connection.
It's the same melody, but a completely different feel.
Nella Fantasia, it's almost ethereal.
Otherworldly. Yeah.
It's a perfect example of how a film score can just transcend the screen.
It becomes something timeless,
Wow.
connecting with people on a deep level.
And then to think that the Mission score lost the Oscar.
Yeah.
Well, a score that mostly used pre-existing jazz pieces.
It's true.
Morricone himself felt robbed.
Understandably.
And I can say why.
The Academy actually changed the rules for Best Original Score because of that, to make them stricter.
It makes you wonder, what is originality in art, especially film music? Speaking of originality, it makes you think about Morricone's influences. Even his most groundbreaking work, he drew inspiration from somewhere, right? Avant-garde music, classical compositions, folk music.
He blended it all to create something new.
So maybe originality isn't just about coming up with something completely new, but about taking those existing elements and shaping them into something unique, something memorable.
Like Gabriel's oboe transforming into Nella Fantasia.
Exactly.
Same melody, but a whole new emotional depth.
And if we look at that Oscars controversy through that lens,
It gets interesting.
it does.
Did Herbie Hancock deserve that win for arranging existing pieces? It's debatable.
Very debatable.
But his score for Round Midnight, it was incredibly effective for that film.
I think that's fair to say. It's almost impossible to judge originality in a vacuum, isn't it? When a score is so intertwined with the film itself.
It becomes about how effectively that music supports the story, evokes emotions, enhances the viewing experience,
That's a lot more nuanced.
than just ticking a box for originality.
So we've talked about Morricone's path to success, his work across different genres, even this debate about originality. But I'm really curious about his relationship with Sergio Leone.
Ah, yes. The director of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
They were childhood friends, weren't they? And their films, they practically define the spaghetti western. Was there something special about how they worked together?
Definitely. One thing, their workflow was unconventional. Morricone often composed the music before Leone even started filming.
Seriously?
Yeah. Leone wanted the music to be an integral part of the storytelling. He would actually lengthen scenes just to fit Morricone's score. That's how important the music was to him.
That's amazing. It explains why those films have such a deliberate pace.
Like an opera unfolding,
Each scene is so carefully crafted and the music is right there with it.
guiding your emotions.
The Dollars trilogy. A fistful of dollars for a few dollars more. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Morricone's use of sound effects, it was revolutionary. Those whistles, the gunshots, the twanging guitar.
It wasn't just music, it was a whole sonic landscape.
It transported you right to the Wild West.
Instead of traditional orchestral arrangements, he used those unconventional sounds to create this gritty, suspenseful atmosphere. A bold move that paid off, defining the sound of the spaghetti western.
And then there's The Ecstasy of Gold.
One of the most recognizable pieces of film music ever.
It's been used in everything, from Metallica concerts to a Coolio song. We need to hear a clip of that, right?
Absolutely. A little ecstasy is always a good thing.
Chills
Aw.
every time. So Morricone conquers the Western, gets nominated for an Oscar for Days of Heaven, and then what? Did Hollywood come calling?
They did, but it reflects Morricone's independence. He never left Rome to compose
Really?
and never learned to speak English.
Wow, he did things his way.
They came to him. It's pretty amazing.
So what were some of his notable Hollywood collaborations? Any big-name directors?
He scored 3 films for Brian De Palma, including The Untouchables, which earned him another Oscar nomination.
Well, The Untouchables.
And then there were his 2 films with Barry Levinson, Bugsy, which got him his 4th Oscar nomination, and Disclosure. Interesting score, even though the film wasn't as well received.
But Morricone never abandoned his European roots. His collaboration with Giuseppe Tornatore, the director of Cinema Paradiso.
That was a fruitful one.
Cinema Paradiso won an Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, and Morricone's score is just magical.
Pure magic.
They collaborated on so many films. Malena, which earned Morricone his 5th Oscar nomination. The Legend of 1900, which won him a Golden Globe. They really understood each other. So we've covered a lot. Morricone's early life, his work across genres, his success in Europe and Hollywood, his music has touched so many lives. But there's still so much more to uncover.
We haven't even touched on the historical realities of the Guarani people.
You're right. Beyond what's shown in the mission, the Guarani had their own rich history long before the Europeans arrived.
Their story is fascinating, often heartbreaking, especially in the context of colonialism. To truly understand the mission, we need to explore their side of things.
You mentioned the Guarani War.
Yes.
And it makes you wonder, were those missions really havens of peace and learning?
Or is there something else going on, something more complicated?
It seems like there's a much bigger story here. And I, for one, am really interested in learning more about the Guarani perspective, their experiences, their voices.
Absolutely. It's time to uncover what lies beneath the surface of this epic story. Okay, so we've got this clash of cultures, the Jesuits and the Guarani. You mentioned the Guarani War earlier.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, were these missions really these peaceful utopias.
Right. I mean, the film shows us one thing, but our sources, they suggest a much more complicated reality. The Guarani, they had their own culture, their own social structures, long before the Jesuits showed up.
Oh, absolutely.
To understand this story, I think we need to see things from their perspective. What can you tell us about the Guarani people before the missions?
Well, traditionally, they were semi-nomadic, lived in these communal villages throughout the rainforest, skilled hunters, fishermen, farmers, deep connection to the land.
That makes sense given their environment.
Their social structure was based on kinship, reciprocity. They had a complex system of beliefs and rituals. These weren't people just waiting to be, civilized.
Right, they had their own thriving society.
Exactly.
And then the Europeans arrive with their own ideas about, well, everything, religion, society.
Yeah.
Bound to create some tension, right?
Well, absolutely. And it's important to remember the Guaranis weren't a single unified group. They had different leaders, different opinions, different levels of, let's say, willingness to engage with the Jesuits.
Right, there must have been a range of perspective.
Some saw the missions as protection, from the Portuguese slave traders who were becoming more and more aggressive.
Makes sense.
Others were more resistant to the changes that came with, say, converting to Christianity.
It was a tumultuous time.
For the Guarani, oh, absolutely. It was a period of upheaval, uncertainty, a lot of changes happening very quickly.
So how did the Guarani actually experience life in the missions? Were they forced to abandon their traditions, their way of life?
It was a mix, really.
Yeah.
On the one hand, the missions offered protection from those slave traders we talked about, and access to things like education, healthcare.
So benefits as well as drawbacks.
But on the other hand, life was very regimented.
I can imagine.
Jesuits imposed a lot of restrictions on their way of life, They couldn't just come and go as they pleased.
It wasn't freedom.
And they were often required to adopt European-style agriculture, European social customs.
It sounds like a trade-off. Safety, stability in exchange for freedom and autonomy.
That's a good way to put it. It makes you think, how much agency did they really have within this system?
It's a complex question.
A question historians are still debating today.
There's no easy answer.
No. The Jesuit missions had a profound impact on the Guarani,
Yeah.
both positive and negative. They disrupted their traditional ways of life, but they also offered a refuge from some of the worst aspects of colonialism, a complicated legacy.
It is. And then you have the Treaty of Madrid.
Oh, yeah. Talk about throwing everything into chaos.
It really does.
Yeah.
The treaty essentially hands control of the missions over to Portugal. And the Portuguese, they were much more brutal in their treatment of the indigenous population.
Completely different approach.
So how did that change things for the Guarani?
Well, it put them in a terrible position. A no-win situation, really. They could stay in the missions, which were now under Portuguese control, likely to become centers of forced labor exploitation,
Or they could resist,
fight for their independence.
which is what led to the Guarani War.
Exactly. It was about resisting the Portuguese, yes.
Right.
But it was also about resisting the loss of their land, their culture, their whole way of life. It's a fight for survival
Yeah.
against incredible odds.
And the Guarani, they fought back.
They did, with incredible bravery, determination. But ultimately, they were outmatched.
By the colonial forces.
The film's ending, you remember, it's ambiguous,
Yeah, a group of children escaping into the jungle.
suggesting that some survived. But what happened next, in the aftermath of the war? Did the Guarani manage to hold on to their culture?
It's the question that hangs over the film, really.
A question that resonates even today.
What does history tell us?
Well, despite immense suffering, displacement, the Guarani did manage to preserve their cultural identity. Many fled deeper into the rainforest, trying to escape the colonial expansion.
To hold on to their way of life.
Their language, their stories, their beliefs, they endured, passed down through generations. And even today, Guarani communities throughout South America, they're working to revitalize their culture, to reclaim their heritage.
It's resilience.
It is.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes about their strength, their determination, their ability to hold on to who they are in the face of, every...
It makes you think about the film's themes. Forgiveness, reconciliation. Is it even possible to forgive? To move forward when the wounds are so deep?
It's a question we all grapple with. The mission, it doesn't give us easy answers,
Yeah.
but it suggests that forgiveness, even in the most difficult situations, can be a powerful force for healing, for transformation.
That brings us back to Rodrigo Mendoza.
De Niro's character.
He starts as this brutal mercenary involved in the enslavement of the Guarani, and yet he goes through this incredible change, seeking redemption, fighting alongside them.
It's his connection with the Guarani, his willingness to learn from them, to fight for their cause, that ultimately redeems him. It's a powerful reminder that change is possible, even for those who have done terrible things.
It's interesting to contrast his journey with Father Gabriel's, who represents a more pacifist approach.
Right, two different ways of resisting oppression.
Both trying to protect the Guarani, but with very different ideas about how to do that.
And the film doesn't shy away from that dilemma. There's no easy answers, no clear-cut good guys and bad guys. Both approaches have their costs, their consequences.
Even when you're fighting for what's right.
The choices we make can have unintended consequences, devastating consequences.
Powerful message.
Especially relevant today, I think. As we're still dealing with the legacy of colonialism, its impact on indigenous peoples around the world.
The Mission is more than just a historical drama. It's a reflection on humanity, isn't it? Our capacity for good and evil, for violence, for forgiveness.
A film that stays with you.
It really does.
Makes you question your own beliefs, consider the complexities of the world.
And speaking of complexities, let's circle back to that 1987 Oscars controversy. Morricone's score for The Mission. It really makes you think about how we define originality in art, especially film music. So picture this. 1987, the Oscars. The Mission is up for Best Original Score.
Big night.
Everyone thinks Morricone's a shoo-in.
I mean, how could he not win?
And then Herbie Hancock wins for Around Midnight.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But Around Midnight, it mostly used pre-existing jazz pieces.
Not original composition.
It was a huge upset. A lot of people felt like it just, I don't know, went against the spirit of the award.
I can see why.
Morricone himself, he felt robbed.
Yeah, he was pretty outspoken about that.
And the Academy, they actually had to clarify their rules for Best Original Score because of all this.
To prevent it from happening again.
It makes you think about how we define originality, especially in film music. Is it just about creating something completely new? Or is there room for reinterpretation, for innovation within, existing musical frameworks?
It's a tough question.
It is.
Even Morricone's most groundbreaking work, like we talked about, it drew inspiration from various sources.
Yeah.
Avant-garde music, classical, folk music.
He blended it all together.
And created something new, something special.
Exactly. Think about those spaghetti westerns.
Yeah.
The sound effects he used, the whistles, the gunshots, the twanging guitar. It was revolutionary at the time.
It really pushed the boundaries.
But those sounds, even though they were unconventional, they still evoked that Wild West atmosphere.
Just in a different way.
So maybe it's not just about inventing something totally new, but about transforming existing elements, reshaping them into something fresh, exciting.
Right. Like Gabriel's oboe being adapted into Nelefantasia later on.
Exactly. Same melody, but a completely different feel.
A new emotional depth.
If we think about the Oscars controversy like that,
It adds another layer, doesn't it?
it really does. Did Herbie Hancock deserve to win? It's still debatable.
Oh, yeah.
But his score for Around Midnight was definitely effective in that film.
No question about it.
Mm.
So it's not just about ticking a box for originality.
It's more nuanced than that.
It's about how the music serves the film, how it makes you feel when you're watching it, how it deepens your understanding of the characters and the story,
That's what matters.
the overall impact, the emotional resonance. That's what Morricone was a master of.
He was a musical storyteller.
His music wasn't just background noise. It was an essential part of the experience.
It's amazing to think about everything we've covered in this deep dive. Ennio Morricone, he wasn't just a composer,
He was a true innovator,
a musical chameleon, moving between genres effortlessly.
creating these sonic worlds.
He was a visionary.
His impact goes way beyond film scores. You hear his music everywhere.
I know. In hip-hop tracks, video games, commercials.
It's woven into our culture.
And The Mission, with its powerful story, those stunning visuals, and Morricone's incredible score, it's a perfect example of his genius.
Absolutely.
It's a film that stays with you, makes you think about colonialism, faith, violence, forgiveness.
And music's role in all of that.
It's powerful stuff.
Really powerful.
So we hope this deep dive has inspired you, made you curious to explore further, maybe watch The Mission again.
Or listen to some of Morricone's other scores.
Be fresh ears.
There's a whole world out there to discover.
Here's a final thought to consider.
The film shows both peaceful resistance and armed struggle as ways of responding to oppression.
It's a question that resonates today. What's the right way to fight for what you believe in? And how can music, whether it's a powerful score or a protest song, be a tool for change, for understanding, for bridging those divides between cultures?
We've just scratched the surface here.
There's always more to learn, more to discover. So keep exploring, keep questioning, keep listening.